Tehran is being bombed by Israel in what is clearly a major operation aimed at dismantling the entire structure of the Iranian regime. The targets: government buildings, Revolutionary Guard facilities, and of course, the homes of the regime's top officials. And yes, nuclear-related sites as well, according to Israeli sources.
Katz says significant strikes in Tehran coming, claims capital dotted with soon-to-be destroyed nuke sites.
This was an expected offensive. As early as June 16th, reports were already predicting that Tehran would become the epicenter of this week's attacks, and that's exactly what's happening.
Israel attacking Tehran after Iran claims hit on Mossad.
Interestingly, now that Khamenei's regime seems to be almost completely out of the game, Donald Trump has decided to drop his calls for dialogue and tried to jump on the bandwagon at the last minute. Of course, he doesn't have much of a choice, because Netanyahu has backed him into a corner, blowing up his entire Middle East strategy. Take a look.
Iran should have signed the deal I told them to sign. What a shame and waste of human life. Simply stated, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I said it over and over again. Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran.
Yes, you heard correctly. Donald Trump has called for the immediate evacuation of Tehran. And what does that suggest? That something big is coming. Are we about to witness a massive Israeli operation over the skies of the capital? Is the United States preparing to get directly involved in the conflict in the coming hours or days? Everything is up in the air, quite literally. And not surprisingly, the reaction from Tehran's residents came quickly. In the middle of the night, following that tweet, convoys of cars fleeing the city multiplied once again, especially, it seems, those carrying top regime officials racing out the city. And that's not all. Trump cut short his trip to return to Washington from the G7 and ordered the preparation of the White House Situation Room, the place where top government officials oversee military operations in real time. Many of you probably remember at least this image from when Washington took down Osama bin Laden. Well, this is that very same room. And not only that, he's even clashed publicly with former allies over this issue, exposing the rift that's now emerging at the very heart of the MAGA movement. Some are calling for action against Iran, while others prefer to let the Ayatollah's regime do whatever it wants. Take a listen, because this is worth hearing.
Somebody please explain to Kooky Tucker Carlson that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Well, what can I say? Trump and Trumpism. Meanwhile, the Israelis are sticking to their plan. Over the past 48 hours, they've struck a secret Iranian military command center while top officers were inside. They've destroyed a centrifuge production plant. They've blown up multiple missile launchers and storage facilities. A hacker group has attacked Iran's state-owned Separ bank and wiped out large amounts of its data. And they've hit the Natanz nuclear facility and the massive Tabriz airbase once again. In short, they've been busy, yet they've still had time to issue a brand new threat.
We've pulled off a number of surprises when the dust settles. You're going to see some surprises on Thursday night and Friday. That will make the beeper operation almost seem simple.
For those who don't remember, the beeper operation refers to a series of explosions triggered by modified pagers that had explosives hidden inside, causing massive damage within Hezbollah's ranks.
The Israelis spent months preparing these pagers, which were then sold to members of the Lebanese terrorist group Hezbollah and detonated almost simultaneously on September 17th and 18th last year. The result? At least 42 people killed, and the entire world wondering how on earth Israel managed to pull something like this off.
After that, well, nothing the Israelis do now should really surprise us. Or should it? We'll see what exactly the Israeli ambassador means, as he's even set a date for an operation even more complex than this one. In any case, one thing is clear: Netanyahu isn't going to stop until he's decapitated every last piece of Iran's military capabilities, because chances are he won't get another opportunity like this for a very long time. This is a window of opportunity that they want and need to take full advantage of. So let me say it up front: negotiating or pausing, that's not even on the table right now. Anyone still hoping for that can forget about it. Plus, Israel now holds an advantage it didn't have just a few months ago. Iran is being left completely isolated. No one is coming to the Ayatollah's aid. No one. Not even their long-time terrorist proxies, who's received endless weapons and cash from Tehran for years in order to attack Israel. We're talking about Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and not even the Shia militias in Iraq. None of them are doing anything. In fact, most aren't even lifting a finger. Why? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explain right now. But first, I have a question for all of you watching. How is it possible that nearly half of you who've watched our videos over the past year still aren't subscribed to our channel? If you're watching this video, you clearly enjoy this kind of content, and you want to understand what's happening and why it's happening around the world. So, subscribe to VisualPolitik so you won't miss a thing. It's completely free, and you have no idea how much it helps us to keep creating content like this. So, what do you say? Do you want to join us? Hamas? All it takes is one click, and that's it. That said, the burning question right now on VisualPolitik is why? Why does Ayatollah Khamenei seem abandoned by those who, until very recently, were his military proxies in the region? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explain next.
Left to their fate.
We've talked about this plenty of times before, but to sum it up, Iran essentially controls 4 major armed groups in the Middle East, groups it has funded, trained, and armed for years. In Lebanon, as you all know, there's Hezbollah, until recently considered the most powerful non-state military force in the world, a group responsible for some of the deadliest missile attacks against Israel in recent years. Second, though with less capability and threat, are the Houthis in Yemen. Third, the Shia militia groups in Iraq, which we'll discuss in a moment, and which have grown stronger in recent years. And finally, although not directly controlled by Tehran, there's Hamas, whose ties with Iran have grown significantly over the past decade. These 4 groups, along with various franchise operations in countries like Syria and Afghanistan, some of which have already been dismantled, formed what was known as the Axis of Resistance, a strategy Tehran has pursued for over a decade, turning itself into a kind of regional octopus. The tentacles, as we've outlined, Hezbollah, the Iraqi militias, the Houthis, and even Hamas. The head, always Iran. Well, Israel has been cutting off those tentacles one by one since the October 7th attacks, and what we're witnessing now is the final phase, the strike against the head of the entire network. But even though Jerusalem has severely weakened the Iranian regime's proxies, what's surprising is that not a single one of them has done much of anything to retaliate against Israel for Operation Rising Lion. Absolutely none of them. And to understand why, we've taken a close look at each case. Let's break it down. On October 7th, Hamas thought it was about to change history with a brutal, ruthless, and meticulously planned attack. Their goal was to spark a blaze that would ignite the entire Middle East. And behind that strategy was this man, Yahya Sinwar. Sinwar is now history. And I don't just mean because of what he orchestrated. In October last year, Israel sent him on a one-way trip. But his name is crucial to understanding why Hamas is in the position it finds itself in today. You see, Sinwar believed that the shock of the October 7th attacks would trigger Iran's entire network of allies to rise up in a coordinated attack, leaving Israel surrounded on every front. Instead, as you're all witnessing, the exact opposite has happened. Rather than uniting the anti-Israel axis into a massive joint offensive, and rather than rallying the Arab world against the Zionist state, Tehran's friends are nowhere to be found, and in many cases are without weapons. On one hand, according to the Israeli military, more than 20,000 Hamas fighters have either been eliminated or are no longer able to fight. And keep in mind, that's about 2/3 of their entire force prior to October 7th. Yes, Hamas has been recruiting new fighters, but of course it's not the same having a soldier with years of experience versus a brand new recruit whose only real motivation is a desire for revenge against Israel. Their arsenals have also been severely depleted. To give you an idea of the roughly 20,000 rockets Hamas was estimated to have before the October 7th attacks, today it's believed they have only 10 to 15% remaining. And let's not forget the most important factor. Israel now controls a devastated Gaza, where its army is operating mercilessly against anyone who challenges its authority. And given a situation like that, the last thing on Hamas's mind is trying to assist Iran in any way. They're not even considering it, and probably couldn't even if they wanted to, because their only real objective at this point is simply trying to survive. Like I said, they've lost nearly their entire arsenal and are surrounded by Israeli troops on the ground. In fact, the situation in Gaza has deteriorated to the point where, even if Hamas wanted to reopen a full-scale war against Israel, the local Gazan population could turn against them, which, by the way, is already starting to happen to some extent. The most recent poll conducted in Gaza, just last month, shows that Hamas's approval rating in Gaza had dropped by 21 percentage points between June 2024 and May 2025, down to 43%. These days, Hamas is a force that receives more disapproval than approval in the territory. And obviously, the brutal war of attrition taking place in Gaza is leading more and more Gazans to see Hamas as ultimately responsible for all this suffering. Naturally, this drastically reduces any chance they might have of coming to Tehran's aid. What's perhaps harder to understand, though, is Hezbollah's inaction. It's true that the Lebanese group was also brutally decapitated by Israel last year, but they still retain far far more structure and resources than Hamas. So the question is, why is Hezbollah, a militia directly tied to Iran and Shia Islam, doing absolutely nothing? Well, there's a bit more to this one. First, we need to understand that Hezbollah is no longer what it used to be. According to data from the Israel Defense Forces, over 70% of Hezbollah's firepower has been neutralized, including parts of its tunnel network and transportation systems. It's estimated that 4,500 fighters have been killed and 9,000 wounded. Together, these two figures represent nearly half of Hezbollah's military strength prior to October 7th, 2023. Not to mention that Israel has stepped up its intelligence war. Several senior Hezbollah commanders have been taken out in drone strikes, and many weapons depots have been systematically sabotaged. And that's not all, because in recent months, the Israeli offensive has had a dual effect, both military and political. Even the Lebanese government, yes, the same one that for years was practically under Hezbollah's control, has now publicly called for Lebanon not to be dragged into a war with Israel. And the question is, why make this statement now? Quite simply, because that would be the worst thing that could happen to the country. A country already mired in a devastating economic crisis.
Lebanon's recovery and reconstruction needs estimated at $11 billion.
We're talking about a crisis in which the Lebanese pound has lost more than 90% of its value in recent years, where youth unemployment has soared above 40%, and where daily power outages have become completely normal. So, given that context, who on earth, even Hezbollah, would want to drag the country into another war with Israel? Right now, what Lebanese society wants is simply to move on. The card Hezbollah is playing here is essentially one of survival. And it's important to remember, Hezbollah isn't just a terrorist military group, it's also a political organization. For years, it essentially built a parallel state, providing all kinds of services to a large portion of the Lebanese population. This, of course, has given them enormous social influence they don't want to lose. To give you an idea, this is a group that operates entire supermarket chains and hands out food aid cards to thousands of Lebanese citizens. In short, this is a very different story from Hamas. It seems the political wing of Hezbollah has now taken control of the organization and reached a very clear conclusion. Fighting Israel head-on will cost us everything we've built. It's better to stay quiet. Among other reasons, because if they opened a new front with Israel, they'd likely lose much of their public support very quickly. People in Lebanon are absolutely fed up with endless conflict. The solution? Forget about Iran and Khamenei. Once this all blows over, they can give us a call, and then we'll see. But do you know what? Even that's not the entire story. Since Nawaf Salam was appointed Prime Minister, the Lebanese government has also shaken up the radical group. And if you don't believe me, see for yourself in headlines like this.
Salam has promised to enforce accountability and implement the ceasefire with Israel. Independent Shia cabinet ministers can help him reach those goals while showing there is an alternative to Hezbollah.
The new government agenda has sought to isolate Hezbollah through legal means and force it to accept that the monopoly on weapons belongs solely to the national army. In other words, Hezbollah would become strictly a political and social organization, period. And this has even led, for the first time in many years, to direct military action by state forces against Hezbollah's military wing.
For example, shortly after taking office, Salam deployed an additional 1,500 troops south of the Litani River, the area where Hezbollah has its strongest presence, to confiscate weapons and dismantle positions. And that's not all. In just 3 months, Army engineers have demolished more than 500 sites, including rocket launchers, storage depots, and command centers. All of this has been carried out based on coordinates provided by an international committee that includes Israel and the United Nations.
And as if all that weren't enough, there's still one more factor. Following Israel's strike on Hezbollah last year, some more autonomous cells began to emerge, with local leaders increasingly reluctant to follow Tehran's direct orders. Why the hell should we serve the Iranians? And let's be clear, Hezbollah hasn't disappointed. It still has thousands of fighters, missile stockpiles, and significant political influence in Beirut. But as we've explained, the old blind loyalty to Iran is in crisis, if not outright disappearing. And of course, if the most powerful group in the Ring of Fire, in the axis of resistance, is taking this position, what can we expect from Iran's last major proxy, the Houthis? Well, see for yourselves. The Houthis in Yemen are the only Iranian lackeys still doing their master's bidding.
Yemen's Houthis target Israel with ballistic missiles in coordination with Iran.
Though, to be fair, they've followed Tehran's lead, but with very different results.
5 Palestinians wounded, including 3 children, after Houthi missile hits West Bank.
If intentions are what count, then Tehran must be thrilled that at least one of its puppets has fired missiles toward Israel. But if we're talking about the actual effectiveness of those attacks, well, you've seen it for yourselves. The reality is, the Houthis have shown a willingness to help Tehran and target Israel with their missiles. But to be honest, it seems more like a symbolic gesture than anything else. You know, something along the lines of, I'll pretend to care, but I'm not about to get myself into serious trouble. Things are complicated enough as it is. In fact, this whole missile business isn't even what really interests Tehran. What matters most to Iran when it comes to the Houthis is their ability to destabilize the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and that's about it. Because as you can imagine, the Houthis simply don't have the capability to inflict real damage on Israel from so far. Whether they fire 1, 2, or even 10 missiles, it's not going to change the course of this conflict. And it's not just about the number of missiles or their technology. Geography isn't on their side either. At over 2,000 kilometers, that's more than 1,200 miles from Israel. Any missile or drone they try to launch toward Tel Aviv is usually detected very quickly and shot down before it ever reaches its targets, whether by Israel, the United States, or even in some cases, Jordan. On top of that, we have to add the strikes carried out by US and Israeli forces over the past few months, which have also weakened the Houthis' infrastructure. So yes, the Houthis have technically joined Iran's attacks on Israel, but in a very modest way and without causing any real damage. And really, this is why, at the end of the day, in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, this whole Houthi situation barely even matters. It's a very different story, however, when it comes to Iraq's Shia militias. These are groups that have grown significantly in recent years. In a way, they're Tehran's latest gamble, and they're still relatively untouched. Many experts believe that they could eventually take over Hezbollah's role, and not only attack Israel, but even rise up against the Iraqi government to seize control of the country. Basically, to do what Hezbollah once did in Lebanon. Will that happen? We'll see. Time will tell. In any case, here on VisualPolitik, we'll dive deeper into these groups in future videos. But for now, you've seen it for yourselves. Iran is alone, and that's unlikely to change. Tehran's loyal lapdogs, whom it has fed for so many years, have suddenly decided to stay quiet in their kennel. Sure, there are a few Houthi missiles here and there, but the real actors who could actually cause damage, even if limited, namely Hamas and Hezbollah, have barely lifted a finger. And look, we're not saying things couldn't still change, but if it hasn't happened already, given what's raining down on Iran right now, it seems unlikely it will happen in the coming days. In fact, what we're witnessing is proof that Israel's campaigns over the past few years against Hezbollah and Hamas are paying off. And right now, the axis of resistance, Tehran's ring of fire, may not even exist anymore. But now, it's your turn. Do you think Tehran might get lucky and one of its allies will finally step in to defend it? Could Israel's offensive end up wiping out the future of both Hezbollah and Hamas? Let us know your thoughts down below, and let's start a debate. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to VisualPolitik. It's free and it helps us out a lot. As always, thank you so much for being there. Take care, all the best, see you next time.